Hello, good evening, and welcome back to another episode of Minds on Guard, where we are learning how to guard our minds against all of the manipulations and attacks that we come under here in the 21st century, specifically with regards to media, social media, and in particular, the education system. We have been spending a lot of time and effort exploring the damage inflicted on the minds of our children in our public schools, specifically by focusing on the teaching, or rather failure to effectively teach the skill of reading. The main reason I've been emphasizing this issue is that we know that our ability to read well has a direct causal link to our ability to reason well. The more skilled we are at reading, the more deeply we're able to think about and abstract meaning, thus building understanding about reality. To keep our minds on guard, we need to understand how they have been attacked in the past so that we do not fall victim to the same kinds of attack in the future. We must also equip ourselves with knowledge about these things so that we can make efforts to protect our loved ones from harm. We really are in the midst of a long and dangerous war, the war for our minds. There are powers at work which seek to gain control over our thinking, and ultimately our lives. Let's continue to learn about these things and strengthen our resolve to stand against them. We're going to wrap up the portion of our education exploration that deals with the artificially induced dyslexia in thousands of children. This will be a more granular and data-heavy video, but I hope to show that there is clear and compelling evidence that not only does the whole word method cause children to become dyslexic, but the teaching establishment does not wish to admit that this method is faulty. Also, that there is a cheap and effective method of remediation that virtually guarantees success if only the powers that be would act with integrity and put the well-being of children before their careers and positions of authority. We will be using the book, The Crimes of the Educators, as our resource for the data in this video. This book is a fantastically written expose on the history of the declines in education, as well as a needed critical commentary on the education institutions who have created, funded, and perpetuated what amounts to really a criminal level of harm exerted on millions of children. The authors cover their findings with integrity, and their research is quite rigorous. For our examination this evening, we will be looking at the chapter, Edward Miller Proved the Sight Method Causes Dyslexia. Let's dive in and see what we can learn. Edward Miller was not an experimental psychologist, nor was he someone who could have been considered a part of the academic elite who conducted research for deeply funded policy institutions. He was also not a proficient reader when, in 1988, he reached out to Dr. Samuel Blumenfeld to understand more about the causes of dyslexia in people. Miller had seen Dr. Blumenfeld speak on a television broadcast and was particularly intrigued about the topic of dyslexia because he, himself, had been diagnosed as having that particular disorder. Despite what he considered to be a significant handicap, he managed to holistically form ways to survive and make it through his schooling. And eventually he became an assistant administrator at a high school in Hollywood, Florida. He had learned about the two ways that reading is taught, both whole word and the phonetic methods, through Rudolf Flesch's book, Why Johnny Can't Read, and realized that he had been brought up under the whole word sight method. In 1986, Miller decided to investigate the issue of dyslexia in response to his grandson Kevin showing signs of reading disability. Kevin was being taught via the whole word methods. The words he was being forced to memorize were readily accessible to him. However, when Dr. Flesch gave him these small phonetic readers, Kevin struggled intensely. Edward recognized the pain in his grandson, seeing a direct parallel to his own experience, and decided that he would try to understand what was going on. He recalled from Dr. Blumenfeld's book on the NEA regarding the behavioral conditioning of Ivan Pavlov and how he had devised a way of artificially inducing behavioral disorganization by introducing two conflicting stimuli to any organism. What Miller saw was a clear example of this playing out when Kevin, who was only able to recognize the pictures of words he'd been shown, was suddenly presented with the phonetic structure of the words and began attempting to read that way. He simply couldn't do it, and it was due to the artificially induced disorganization caused by the faulty reading methods meeting up with the effective ones head on. Miller thought that he'd made a profound connection, and he was going to show exactly where and how the problems were occurring. First, Miller saw that Kevin had been fascinated by his Dr. Seuss books. These, along with many other preschool readers, were designed with the underlying methods of sight reading in mind. Dr. Seuss himself was quoted saying that the books he wrote had word quotas and curated lists that he had to adhere to as per his publishing company. Kids like Kevin were memorizing these books prior to entering the first grade, where they would then be met with a phonics course leading to a clash of conflicting methods resulting in disorganized thinking, leading to dyslexia. This was profound indeed, and Miller decided that he would present these ideas about the origins of educational dyslexia to the governing bodies and medical research labs who had been devoting large sums of money and energy to finding the cures. He, unfortunately, was not met with the kinds of enthusiasm that we might hope for. Miller decided he would develop a test to determine whether a child or an adult was a sight word reader or a phonetic reader, as well as when their respective mode of reading had become permanent in any given test subject. The test would also provide a means to scientifically determine the severity of any individual's dyslexia. The test consists of two sets of words. The first set is composed of 260 sight words taken from two of Dr. Seuss's books, The Cat in the Hat and Green Eggs and Ham. The second set contains 260 equally simple words drawn from Rudolf Flesch's phonetic word lists in Why Johnny Can't Read. The sight words are arranged in alphabetical order across the page. They include such multisyllabic words as about, another, mother, playthings, something, yellow. Words from Flesch's book, also arranged alphabetically across the page, are all at a first grade level, single syllable and phonetically regular. In other words, for a child who knows his or her phonics, neither set of words would pose any problem. What the test is designed to show is that a child who has been taught by sight methods read the sight words quickly and with very few errors. But then, when they come to the single-syllable phonetic words, they slow down considerably and make many more errors. For example, on tests conducted by Miller, an 11-year-old child was able to read the sight words at 51 words per minute with no errors, but read the phonetic words at 17 words per minute with 91 errors. That child was clearly dyslexic. A second child, age 7, reads the sight words at a speed of 44 words per minute with no errors, but read the phonetic words at 24 words per minute with 47 errors. Both youngsters had become dyslexic. The fact that they could read the sight words at over 30 words per minute meant that their word identification mode was automatic and therefore permanently fixed. Their cognitive block against phonics had been established by the way that they had learned to read. Unless the blockage was removed through intensive remedial intervention, it would remain a major lifelong handicap, preventing them from pursuing careers that required accurate reading skills. In January 1990, Miller obtained permission to administer his test to 68 students at the Rhonda Klingman Elementary School. Of the 68 students, 25 were 4th graders, 26 were 2nd graders, and 17 students were from different grades in Title I. The results were alarming. Of the 26 2nd graders, 5 were phonetic readers, 11 were permanently holistic readers, with a sight reading speed of over 30 words per minute, and therefore educationally dyslexic, and 10 were in a state of reading limbo, that is, they hadn't yet developed automaticity in either word identification mode and could either become fluent phonetic readers or educationally dyslexic readers. The outcome would depend on how they were taught to read in the next few months. Of the 25 4th graders, 14 were phonetic readers and 11 were holistic, that is, educationally dyslexic. None were in an indeterminate state. In other words, they all had developed the degree of automaticity in their word identification mode that made their reading mode permanent. If this 4th grade class was typical of 4th grade classes throughout North Carolina, this meant that 44% of all students in the public schools of that state would emerge at the end of their school careers educationally dyslexic, that is, functionally illiterate. There have been many examples of this test over the years, and in every subject group the findings are conclusive and convincing. Students who are taught to read phonetically are able to perform the tests well, and those who are taught via sight methods are majority educationally dyslexic or functionally illiterate. Dr. Blumenfeld writes, "The implications to be drawn from Edward Miller's theory on the artificial induction of dyslexia are most significant. In the first place, they imply that dyslexia is being caused by the reading instruction methods presently being used in most American public schools, and that educational dyslexia can be prevented by the teaching of intensive, systematic phonics so that the children will become phonetic readers. As Miller has pointed out, a phonetic reader cannot become dyslexic. If what Miller discovered is correct, then the millions of dollars the federal government is spending on finding the genetic causes of dyslexia are a total waste. In addition, the billions of Title I dollars the U.S. Department of Education has spent in support of reading programs that are causing educational dyslexia are worse than a waste. They are being used to commit a horrible crime against the children of this country." Something very telling happened when Miller retested the children at the Rhonda Klingman School 2 years after the initial test. He found that none of the kids who had developed holistic reflexes via whole word reading had become phonetic readers in the 2 years between testing. Many were able to identify the whole word portions faster than before, yet, when it came time to read the phonetic single-syllable words, students actually misread words that they had previously gotten right. Of the 27 6th graders tested, 17 of them did better as 4th graders than they did 2 years earlier on a test designed to show the reading skills of kids in the 1st grade. Miller tried desperately to get the academic establishment to accept his findings. Every time he submitted his work, he was dismissed for various reasons, most of which had to do with either political or economic incentives inherent to the centralized institutions of educational authority. One state reading consultant, Betty Jean Faust of North Carolina, put it thusly: This letter is in response to your request that I review your materials and comment upon your theory of dyslexia. Members of the Department of Public Instruction believe in a multiple approach to teaching reading. We believe that phonics may help the beginning reader if it is done early and kept simple. We do not feel phonics are useful with older students. In my teaching experience, I have encountered several students who could not hear sounds. Therefore, we used other methods for learning to read. In my opinion, all students do not need a phonics assessment. We have never promoted reading words out of context as your assessment does. Time is precious in our schools, and we need activities which promote achievement. Secondly, I believe all students can be taught to read. Some can read better than others, but all students can learn something. We need to guard against the use of dyslexia as a term for catch-all reading problems. Now, there is just so much wrong with this response. We see appeals to authority, special case pleading, elitist and arrogant valuation of children, and all manner of fallacious logic aimed at avoiding the core issues in favor of a politically correct, obfuscated agenda disguised as well-reasoned policy. This is a masterclass in how to say nothing by using many words. What is it that causes so much pushback and obfuscation of truth within the institutions of power and authority? We will begin to look at the concept of regulatory capture and the corruption that exists within the academic, medical, and political elite in upcoming videos. Until then, stay safe, check in on your loved ones, and stay diligent and vigilant, keeping your minds on guard.